the things that really matter most in life, it's not about the things you acquire. It's more about the people and the relationships that you build and the good that you do. So you kind of learn that life is important and the relationships you build with people are important. Because that's what, when you do pass away, that's the things that people remember and that's the things that people talk about. They're not going to mention all the money that you'd accumulated or things like that, or the terrible things that you may have done at some point. It's all the good things and all the good things you accomplished for yourself and for your family and things like that.
Bonjour, you're listening to the Curious Jord podcast. My name is Jordan. This episode is about the Burquitlam Funeral Home. I sat down with Melani. She's a second-year apprentice with the funeral home. She had a lot of good information. This was kind of a cool episode for me. They've all been good so far, but this one was probably my favorite. It's just a topic I've been wanting to look into because it hasn't been present in my life, fortunately, and I don't know too much about it. So I was genuinely very curious, and she answered all of my stupid questions very gracefully. And I just want to say thanks again to the Burquitlam Funeral Home for facilitating the whole interview in this episode. So I hope you enjoy. Cool. So I'm here at the Burquitlam Funeral Home with Melani. And just to start out, if you could tell me a little bit about here. You just gave me a pretty good tour. I got to see the chapel and the reception area and all that good stuff. Yeah, just tell me a little bit about this funeral home and then your role here, I guess. Yeah,
I wish we could give you some more accurate details. I tried to check the dates, but we've been around for over 50 years now.
Yeah.
I don't think we've quite hit the 60. We're somewhere in between there. So we're a pretty old funeral home. We are independently owned, which means that we are not run by any sort of large corporations such as SCI or Arbor Memorial. So in that regard, we pretty much have a lot of freedom to do kind of more things that we like because we're not corporately owned. My role here is I'm an apprentice funeral director, and I've been doing this for just about 2 years now. Just recently graduated from the Canadian College of Funeral Service just this past September. So I'm probably roughly about a year away before I'm fully licensed. So I still got quite a little ways to go. Started off completely fresh, no funeral knowledge before I started getting into the program. So
what got you interested in that?
It's really probably something that I stumbled upon when I was trying to figure out what that thing I wanted to do for the rest of my life was. Back when I was in Ontario, I went to college for a child and youth worker. So I kind of wanted to find something that I could carry over those skills that I learned in helping people and dealing with families and with children. So in my research to find out what I want to do, I stumbled across funeral directing and thought that'd be the perfect fit.
Yeah.
And then I applied for school, and it's been the same ever since.
Okay.
Everything's kind of fell into place after that, too.
That's great.
Yeah.
So when you're going through school, do you get sort of an outline of everything to do with the funeral business, or do you delineate into specific avenues?
Yeah, so when you first apply to school, you kind of have two directions on which you can take. So you can either become just a funeral director, which is just the meeting with families and organizing the service, or you could do the embalmer portion just by itself as well, or you can do both.
Okay.
So when I first went through school, I decided to go through what they call the Foundations program. So what that means is I'm going into school without having an apprenticeship already in place. I'm kind of starting off fresh. The school that we go to is all online classes, so everything is done remotely. We do meet with our teachers and with our entire class a couple points during the year. So semester 1, we come in, we kind of get a refresher course and we'll be learning for that term. And then, of course, we go to school for exams with our classmates as well.
Right on.
Yeah.
So it seems like it's kind of like almost like a trade. Like if I wanted to become a plumber or something, like you'd go through you'd go and learn the initial stuff and then go through your apprenticeship and eventually get your
you have your theory work and then you have your workplace experience until you have your required amount of hours. And for me, you have to have 50 funeral arrangements that you complete. You have to have 50 completed embalmings and a certain amount of work experience and a certain amount of work hours before you can be fully licensed.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what, after you graduate school and then you start, are you basically, so you come to a funeral home like this, and then are you shadowing someone for a little while and then you start branching it on your own a little bit?
Yeah, so since I started with the Foundations program, I pretty much just jumped into school without having any funeral home employment in place. So Lauren, who's our manager here, she works with the teachers at the school to kind of get people's foot in the door. So I got her contact through the school to come in as a funeral assistant, which means I'm just a presence here, handing out cards, helping people find seats, just very basic information to kind of learn how it works to begin. So I originally started doing that a couple times, worked here a couple times a week during small services. And then at that time, they're actually looking for someone for their sister side company for an administrative position. So I applied for that and then got hired shortly after that. Then everything just sort of fell into place afterwards.
Okay.
So I kind of went from an assistant to an administrative position. Then once I became an apprentice here, then I started doing the more directings and the embalmings and things like that.
Okay. Sorry, could you just hold the mic a little bit?
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, it's all good. During our conversation, if I say something that's like the wrong terminology, or like correct me, or if I say, because for me, the reason why I'm so interested in this is probably because it's not familiar to me whatsoever. I've been to I went to my ex-girlfriend's grandfather's visitation like 10 years ago, and then maybe 15 years ago I was at some funeral for someone that I can barely remember or something, right? Like it was just, so it's so vague in my memory and it's not current and I don't know how any of it works. So if I say something stupid,
no worries.
correct me, or if my etiquette is off.
No, it's really not common knowledge, the kind of stuff that we do and the stuff that we know.
Yeah, that's why I'm so curious about it. So like what, let's just say there's a death in my family. I'd imagine most people die in some sort of hospital or like senior living situation. From that point, I'm their family member. I call the funeral home, and then what happens?
Yeah, so usually people who pass away in a care home or an age home or a hospice, those facilities do like to have a record of a funeral home already in place before that time. So usually before the person happens to pass away in that regard, they kind of have an idea of what they want and what they know where to go, because people pass away from old age, they know that time is coming, so they kind of slowly start to prepare themselves over time. For people who pass away in hospitals, it can be something that's very sudden. Maybe someone had a heart attack and they ended up in the hospital, and that's just where they happen to pass away. So usually at that point, someone passes away, they realize, okay, we have to do something now. And then we have to phone someone, we have to find a place to go. Things are very time crunched a lot of the time too. So one thing that people don't really think about is that they can price shop for funeral services, because every funeral home in the area probably has different price range and different services that they can offer. So a lot of times the funeral home that people go to is just the first place that they call. It's usually something that they have gone to a service previously, or they know someone who knows someone kind of thing, or it's just somewhere they drive by every day and they figure they're going to call them. So usually once the passing occurs and the family gives us that phone call, we usually kind of get some basic information for them to start, like the name of the person who's passed, where they are, the date of their passing. And then we usually book in a time for them to come in and meet with us in person. And that can usually take place either like the next day, even the same day, or a couple days, as soon as they're ready to.
Okay.
Yeah, because it can be quite a shock after someone passes away too, so we don't like to rush that process. So as soon as someone's ready to come and meet with us, we usually book a time.
Okay. What amount of time is that usually? Because obviously, like you said, there's a time constraint, like the person has passed away and their remains need to be dealt with. So there must be a sweet spot there in getting the people to come in and not pressuring them too much. Yeah,
I mean, every family I find is different. There are some families who someone dies, they want to get everything done ASAP. They want to come in the same day. I've had people come in to meet with me at the funeral home before the body has even been picked up from the nursing home. Like, they want to get everything organized super, super quick, and sometimes they're just organized enough to begin that soon. Other families, sometimes it hits them a little bit harder and they're not ready to meet with us because it becomes more real at the time too. So for example, if someone passes away on a Friday, sometimes we'll give them the weekend, take some time with your family, don't rush, give us a call on Monday when you're ready kind of thing.
Okay.
So usually maybe around 2 or 3 days is usually,
Yeah.
I say, an average time before someone comes in to meet.
So once the body is picked up, does it come here?
Yes.
And then everything, I guess I didn't get that part of the tour.
Oh, yeah. Well, I can't really take you through the morgue area and our prep room and things like that. But
Okay.
yes, so we do all of our preparations on site here as well. So if you remember when you took that little tour by the chapel, the very back wall, our
Yeah.
morgue is actually just on the opposite side of that wall.
Okay.
So that whole section back there is our prep room and our storage facilities as well.
Is there like actual legal reasons why I can't see it, or is it just your policy?
It's usually dignity of the deceased because there
Okay.
are names and personal belongings of
course.
people back there. And of course,
Okay.
it's just more dignity for the person and for the families as well.
Oh, okay. So once the body comes here, then what happens? I guess it's based on the family's request,
Yeah.
but functional wise, like I'd like to know like the nitty gritty.
Sure,
like,
yeah.
stuff.
So usually once a body comes here, either from a hospital care home or if they happen to pass, they will go into our storage room that we have here, which is basically just a small temperature controlled room because we have to keep it cool for the bodies to slow down the decomposition process as well. So we usually keep the bodies here on site until we meet with the family, see what kind of arrangements they want to have, whether it be a burial or a cremation, or if they want to have an embalming, a viewing, anything like that. We kind of keep them here until we decide what we want to do. If we do decide that there is going to be a viewing with an embalming or even just a bath and a dressing, we do have to have signed documents beforehand from the family. So we do have to meet with them prior and have something signed before we can perform any type of procedure on the deceased.
What exactly is embalming?
So embalming is a chemical process that we use to slow down the decomposition process. It also sanitizes the body as well. So if you have any type of communicable disease like HIV or AIDS, tuberculosis, anything like that, it kind of destroys those harmful bacteria so it can be safe to view. And it also helps to restore that person to a more natural appearance as well. So if someone dies in a car accident and they're a little bit banged up, we can kind of make them presentable to look more like their natural selves to be viewed.
Okay. And then would a person only be embalmed if they were going to be viewed, like have a viewing?
Yeah, but they don't have to be. There's no legal requirement for anybody to be embalmed. It's usually if there's going to be a delayed viewing kind of thing. So if someone passes away at one time and then the family decides that they won't be able to view for another week or so, or if people are coming from out of town or the service is a little bit later, then it kind of keeps the body fresh, I guess is a nice way to put it. So the decomposition slows down and it can be safely viewed by the public as well.
So is it just a singular chemical that's injected into the body, or is it...
So that's the tricky part because every person is different. Every person dies from different circumstances. So every one of the chemicals that we do have for embalming kind of have their own purpose to help with the body. So for example, if someone had edema when they died, which means that there's like a fluid buildup, I don't know if you know much about that, but it's almost like there's fluid building up within the tissue, so their skin can be very tight and puffy.
Okay.
So there are specific chemicals that kind of drain that fluid over time, kind of get rid of that excess water that's in them.
Okay.
And the same thing can be for someone who perhaps died of cancer and they're very, very thin and very dehydrated. It can kind of re-add the moisture back.
Gotcha.
So every kind of circumstance will have a solution to fix for the embalming. The variables are endless. It totally depends on the way the person died, the medications that they're on, the sicknesses that they had, the effects that everything had on their body. It's totally specific to the person. So we do have to kind of analyze the person and take a look at them, see what needs to be done, see what kind of chemicals that we use, see the condition that they're in, and kind of make our judgments based on that.
Do you do, if someone is pretty banged up or something from a car accident or something horrible, do you do reconstruction of any kind? Yeah?
Yeah, like I personally haven't done many reconstructions. I've observed a couple small ones throughout my time here at the funeral home. And that would just be things like, say, someone has quite a big gash in their nose or something, or they broke their nose in a car accident. There are ways to kind of like fill in the gaps and kind of make it look more like their natural self.
Yeah.
And we would use something like wax for that. So if there's like a really deep cut on someone's face, we would fill it with wax and then put some makeup over top to make it almost like it was never there.
Okay.
Yeah.
What does it feel like the first time you're doing these things? Like you're dressing somebody, or you're dealing with the physical reality?
Yeah. That's always hard to say, because I have seen a few dead bodies before I kind of became into the profession, so I was never really creeped out by it. But I mean, it's an entirely different experience, because you have like a human, a body, a person, but you can't really tell who they were, their personality, how they talked, how they acted, their mannerisms. So they're kind of like a blank slate at that point. So in that way, it's kind of different, because every time I do an embalming with someone, or if I'm dressing someone, I kind of talk to them throughout the entire process. I'd be like, so we're just going to roll you over this way so I can pull your shirt down on this side, and things like that. And so the great thing about having a service for that person is you kind of learn a little bit more about them. So you kind of see like, oh, you're exactly who I kind of thought you were. You kind of look like a cute little old lady, and that's exactly the kind of person you were.
Okay.
So it's weird in that regard, because you don't know them, but they're still like that person that's there in front of you.
It's like getting to know a person in reverse, kind of.
Yeah, in a weird way.
Yeah.
I guess I know there are some directors who kind of have that connection that they can kind of sense certain things. I mean, if I'm in the prep room, I always have some kind of music on in the background. So if I'm having like a nice old man, I'll put on some classic, 50s music or something like that, just to
the talking to them, or the music, is that just stuff that you came up with, or is that something that was encouraged in school?
It wasn't really like an encouragement of any kind. It's just something that I decided to do, and I know other directors do that as well. Because you're in the back, it's quiet, you're with yourself most of the time, and you can be back there for 6 hours a day just working with different people.
Yeah.
So it kind of gives you some peace of mind too, to kind of, like if you're doing any kind of job by yourself in a quiet environment, you want to have some kind of background noise just to make the day go by a little bit faster.
Yeah.
But for that, I kind of tune it to the person that I'm with too.
Yeah.
If I'm doing someone who maybe is in their 30s, I'll listen to something a little more recent, or if I'm just in the mood for a different type of music, it doesn't have to be particular to the person.
Yeah.
Just more something for me, I guess I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I was thinking that exactly the way you just wrapped it up for you, right? Because it's for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Even the talking to the person, it seems, I'd never considered that before, but it definitely seems more respectful for them.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like the sort of thing a nurse would say to a patient, right? Oh, that's interesting. That's a cool insight there. So, like, you've been here for 2 years now, and I'm sure every service they probably have similar themes, but they're all unique to the client. What are some that stick out that you can remember over the course of the 2 years?
Well, I think the biggest one that comes to mind for me was mostly the younger ones that passed away. So I know we had a young boy a year and a half or so. It was quite a while back, but he was young. He was still in high school, I believe. He was just a teenager. And I remember the music that the parents chose for him was, I think, just a random assortment of songs he had in his iPod. So I remember the first thing they plugged in was Black and Yellow by that whoever that song was.
Oh, Wiz Khalifa.
Yeah, that's the one. So it's kind of like a somber environment, but you walk in, you just have Black and Yellow playing, and it kind of just brings life to that person in a way, so it kind of connects with them. But a lot of times I find for younger individuals who pass, it's more celebrating every good part of their life. So I remember this young boy was also a big lacrosse player as well. So a ton of lacrosse team players, there's jerseys and lacrosse sticks everywhere. It was kind of a really special experience, and I've always remembered that one whenever I think back too. Yeah.
It seems like, well, I haven't had too many funerals to experience this, but it seems like people are taking more of an approach to like a celebration of life thing, and maybe you can confirm that or not, but I know, and I'm pretty sure with my friends, like if we're jokingly talking about our funeral or something, we'll be like, oh, I want to be partying, there's going to be like lights and music, and like, it's more of a celebration.
There's beer can in the parking lot every now and then you find.
Yeah. But then I wonder too, if that's the ones you were just explaining where you said the younger ones are kind of more of a celebration. Do you think that has to do with their youthfulness, or do you think that has to do with a changing mindset when it comes to funeral services?
Probably a little bit of both, I would say.
Yeah.
Because I find that over the course of time of what I've learned through school is that funeral services in the past were very ritual based. They're very church based and very more religious. And so as times are changing, they become into more celebrate the life of the person more than just the ritual of dealing with the body kind of thing. And I do find that since a lot of people are kind of pulling away from their religious roots, I guess is a good way, that they're kind of doing what feels right for them too. So for some people, having more of a party than a funeral is what helps them get through the passing. So it's really hard to say. Culture is a very big difference too. So like Chinese services I always find are very specific. They're always very similar. But it totally varies on the family and the best way that they can find the way to deal with their loss.
Yeah. How would Chinese ones differ from, I guess it depends on their request, but what sticks out about them or what's similar amongst them?
Yeah, Chinese services I find are, well, I've done a couple in my time here, but I do find that they're quite similar. They always have the white gloves. It's usually always followed by a cremation, unless there's something else specific. They usually have, everything is done in Chinese, so I couldn't really tell you what kind of things they talk about or any kind of prayers to say or eulogies and things like that, but always dressed in black. They always have the small white envelopes that they hand out. I don't know what's in them. I think it's usually like a candy and a loonie. There's like some cultural things that they do. I believe that they give you a candy because you want to have something sweet on such a bitter day, and they give you a loonie that you have to spend the same day for good luck. I don't know the entire specifics. I've only done quite a few, but usually they're all quite similar in that regard.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting to look at even if you're Chinese and you do everything the exact same way, or like you're New Age and you want to have a big party or something. It seems that the underlying theme is that there needs to be some ritual surrounding the death, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I find that that's the biggest thing, and kind of helping you get over that original hurdle to kind of accepting that the person that you loved is gone. It kind of makes it real in a sense, and it kind of gets you through those first initial steps when someone passes away. Because usually there's shock and there's sadness and there's confusion, and you don't know what to do next. Who do I talk to? What do I do? How do I start living this new life without this person who was so important to me?
Yeah.
So by having a funeral service in any kind of way that suits the family, it kind of makes it real. You're sitting there, you're gathering with people, you're getting that support from your friends and your loved ones, and it kind of builds that community of support to help you get through the hard parts. So it makes it real, and especially like I always find viewings are quite important too. Because a lot of times someone will pass away, they don't want to see them, they're afraid to see them, Death denial is also very, very big in our culture today. So it kind of just makes it real.
Yeah.
I would say it's like the biggest thing to help you start moving forward.
Yeah. I remember the one visitation I was at, and I was looking at them, and they look the same but kind of different. And obviously they would, because they're not alive anymore. But there seems to be something, like, I'm not religious or spiritual, like I don't associate with anything of any kind, but to me, you look at them and there seems to be some sort of power that's gone. Like you can definitely tell, for lack of a better word, the lights are off.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel when I'm in like the prep room too, because there's no movement. Like, if someone's asleep, you see like their chest rising up and down. There's like maybe like random twitches here and there. But when someone has died, there's essentially nothing. There's no movement. There's no nothing there. Whether personal beliefs is a whole other topic. If you believe the spirit is still there, or if they're hovering, or if they're still in the body, who knows? But it's an entirely different experience.
Random twitches?
Well, I just mean like in a living individual, like maybe muscle spasms, or like you sleep and you twitch. Not on the dead bodies.
Oh, okay.
I've never seen anything like that before. But
when you see like mortuaries and stuff, or the morgue in movies and on TV, do you just like scream out loud because you're like, that's not what it's like?
I'm such a critic. Everything I watch, I'm like, that is not what a dead person looks like. That is not the way they would be laid out on this table, or the way they'd be positioned. I'm a very harsh critic when it comes to things like that, but it's...
Do they have the tag on the toe?
They do have toe tags, yes. Not everyone, but more often than not, I do see quite often toe tags. Is
it just specific on where they've come from, or like, why not everybody?
That I couldn't tell you. It could be a hospital thing, or maybe they don't have the hospital wristbands that they usually wear too. But it's usually just a toe tag with a sticker that has their personal information on it and
Pisces.
like their PHN number. Yeah, kind of. And it's just a little string just tied to their toe.
Okay. I think a part of the reason why I wanted to do an episode like this was because I was thinking about my own funeral or my own burial. Mm-hmm. And there's this thing I saw called the Tibetan sky burial. I'm not sure if you're familiar.
I've heard of that, yes.
Where you're like up on the mountain and like the vultures come and like you're just left to nature, essentially, right? And obviously, like in modern civilization and cities, that would be a bit hard to accommodate for a lot of people. And then you drive down the road and you see the cemeteries and stuff. And I'm more thinking I'll go like the cremation way because that seems to be the most logical. But originally I was interested in, okay, so say I did go the traditional route, in quotes, and I'm put into a casket and I'm lowered into the ground. Obviously, Earth takes its toll on the coffin and things start to decompose. And that decomposition probably depends on the vessel that you're buried in, right?
Yeah, for the most, partially.
Partially, okay. So I want to talk about like the partially and the different, like what's the difference between a casket and a coffin? Mm-hmm.
So pretty much the only difference between a casket and a coffin is the shape.
Okay.
Casket is your basic rectangular shape. A coffin is that kind of like English, I mean, it's hard to describe on a podcast, but it's that old style coffin shape that's wider at the shoulders, it gets narrower towards the feet. Like
one you would draw if it were a cartoon or something.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so I'm online and I'm looking at your website and some other funeral services, and there's like a product page for caskets and coffins and that type of thing. And then there's the basic, more economical choices, and then it goes right up to like the Cadillac of caskets, right? It gets ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then I'm looking at this and I'm thinking people want the Cadillac because they think it's going to be the most comfy for the person, and it's the most contained. Like they're not going to be touched by the natural process of time. But obviously all things get touched by that process.
Nothing's going to stop it.
Nothing's going to stop it. So say I've got like a medium priced casket and I go into the ground. How long does it take before that starts to fall apart and the dirt starts to get at me?
Well, that totally varies. It could depend on the material of the casket in terms of the casket breaking down, because eventually everything will start to break down. Your body will start to break down even while you're in the casket. Even if you've been embalmed, there's no stopping decomposition and the natural breakdown of anything. I'm sure if you get the super luxury casket that are made completely of metal and they're airtight seal, things will kind of slow down a little bit. But I mean, eventually all that stuff is going to break down over time. It could be decades, hundreds of years, who knows, depending on the material and how much work went into preventing that process. But time will stop nothing. Eventually it will happen.
Yeah.
No matter if you get the $200 casket or the $2,000 casket, it always catches up.
I saw one that was $35,000. It was like precious metals.
Was it probably the Promethean? That's the big one. Yeah,
that's what it was. Yeah.
Yep, that's the big one. I think that's what Michael Jackson was buried in, but I'm not too sure. I could be wrong about that, but that's probably like top of the line. It's
a bit crazy for me. I think my outlook on all of this, like the death and afterlife, is met with humor.
Yeah.
And it's with my family and friends, I've displayed that humor, and so have they towards me. But I think that's better than not talking about it at all.
Absolutely. That's the best way to kind of understand it and to be comfortable with it, is to talk about it and to laugh about it.
Yeah.
And especially as funeral directors, that's what we have to do all the time, because we're constantly dealing with things that are so heavy and so sad. So we kind of have to make things light that we don't lose our own minds in the process.
Has it had a psychological impact on you, or is that something
I mean, some days are harder than others. Sometimes you can have a family that's just completely broken and you feel it, or if someone loses a child, like you feel that deep within like your heart. So sometimes you'll have families that you feel for. And one of the things that they teach you when you first kind of get into this profession or go through school is that it's not your grief. it's the family's grief. So you kind of have to separate yourself from that in a way, but it's hard. Like if you see someone that's so sad, you want to help them, you want to feel for them, you want to do anything you can to make their pain just a little bit better. So you kind of have to keep things separate, but also you're giving 100% of yourself to that family every time. So it does take a toll over time. And in this industry, people are completely aware of that. So if you're having an extremely hard week and you need like an extra day off, or you just need some time, you need to go home early, everyone's very, very good about that. Okay. So they kind of tailor to your needs, and we support everyone else here in the same regard.
That's great.
Yeah.
You guys play like soccer matches with other funeral homes and stuff? Or?
No, I mean, competition is pretty intense between funeral homes. But I mean, we're all in the same industry, and it's such a small industry that we do have to have those interpersonal relationships to work with each other. But at the same time, you're still competing with other funeral homes in the area. It's a business just like any other. So the services you offer, the price is different. You're always competing with other funeral homes. But being in such a small industry, you have to accommodate one another when you need. For example, the crematorium that we use, located in Maple Ridge, we have a very good business relationship with. So if they need to borrow our hearse someday, or if they need extra materials, we'll gladly swap things back and forth like that.
Okay. So what's the process of cremation like? Obviously, that you guys don't do that here. We
don't do that here. We use a crematorium that's located out of Maple Ridge.
Yeah.
And I believe it's probably I don't know if it's the closest one to us, but every city has their own different bylaws. If there could be a crematorium, the locations where they could be. So crematoriums aren't that easy to come by. So we have a business relationship with the one located in Maple Ridge. So every time we need to have someone cremated, that's where they'll go. So the way that process works is people come here, we kind of get them ready for that process. So we get the paperwork ready, we get the proper permits in place to be cremated. Everybody needs to be cremated in some sort of container as well. So even if you're not purchasing some sort of casket, we do have what we call cremation caskets, which is just a basic wood bottom with a cardboard insert that goes on top of that. So your body is contained, and privacy reasons for that as well. So in the big white van that we showed you outside is where we transport them to the crematorium. So we do take 4 people at a time if it's just for cremations. Oftentimes there will be the odd witness cremation where a family would attend at the crematorium and they get to witness that process. They get to push the start button on the retort, which is the oven, I guess you could call it as well. So we bring our individuals there, and then the crematorium kind of decides who's going to be cremated when, because there are factors in regards to the temperature and everything like that as well. So in terms of temperature, I don't know the exact. I know it's very, very hot.
Yeah.
For certain people, I know larger individuals have to be cremated at a cooler temperature than at, say, children would be cremated. I know little bits in that regard, but I'm not a cremationist, so I don't know the full specs.
What's the necessity in the difference of temperature? Is it to achieve the same end product, like the same consistency, or is it just a matter of a larger person would burn?
I mean, there's a lot of different factors, I believe, that can affect the outcome of the cremation. I mean, everything comes out the same. You always come back in your cremated remains, regardless of what happens during that process. But I do know for, say, heavier individuals, because there is a higher fat content, it can almost cause a grease fire if it's burned too hot. Yeah. So I think you for larger individuals, you start off cold, so you kind of, the fat content will evaporate over time, so you don't get that kind of combustion.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming for smaller individuals or individuals that are of a lighter weight, you can have a higher temperature to just kind of get the process started faster.
How long does it take, like, on average for?
I think it takes about 2 to 4 hours, depending on the person, depending on the casket. Sometimes you'll be cremated in the full wood casket, so those take a little bit more time as well. And of course, size of the person and the bone contents as well. Yeah. So during a cremation, there will be points in time where the cremationist will open up the door, assess how things are going, and kind of use a big long rake to kind of like move around the bones, to like shuffle things around like you would for a normal fire, to like roll around the wood and things like that. So every so often a cremationist will do that, shuffle things around to make sure everything gets fully combusted. And then probably somewhere between 2 to 4 hours later, I would expect they let everything cool down and everything gets swept out of the retort.
Okay.
Yeah.
It must be a good time. Good time. It must be like right now with the aging baby boomers. Like the funeral business must be doing pretty well at this point in time. Right?
I mean, I find our numbers go up every year in that regard too. There's always a higher number. I mean, you will have your good years and your bad years. The thing about funeral service is you can't really predict in a sense of who is going to pass away and how many people are going to pass away. You kind of have a rough idea with the aging baby boomers as well, but you can't expect like, 200 people are going to die this month and 300 people can die this month. It completely varies.
Yeah. How many services roughly will you do a week? I know you said you can't predict, but
it's hard to estimate. Because we can have times where we have maybe like 3 services in a month, or there can be times we have 30.
Okay.
It's so hard to predict in that regard. And sometimes people don't want to have services and they just want to have basic cremations or very basic burials. So in that case, it's just getting someone ready to go to the crematorium or go to the grave site, and that's all.
Is it mostly burials, or is it one way or the other, or is it half and
I find cremation is probably the highest form of disposition in BC at very least. I'd say maybe, if I had to take a guess, probably 85% cremation rate. And I think that goes to the extremely high cost of buying cemetery plots if you haven't already had one in place.
Yeah.
Because they can be thousands and thousands of dollars depending on the location, the cemetery of your choice, and things like that.
Yeah. If a person's going to be buried in one of those plots, would the funeral procession head from here over to the grave site, and then would there be a ceremony there, or? Usually
if someone is organizing a burial, they will often have some sort of formal service at the funeral home, and then a smaller service at the cemetery. Sometimes people, they kind of like to work their own thing. So if they don't choose to have a service here, they just kind of have their own personal thing at the cemetery. So our duty is to get the person casketed at the funeral home here and then have them proceed in the hearse and out to the cemetery. Oftentimes we'll just meet the family there. Processions aren't too common here in BC because of distance and number of people and traffic lights, and it's so easy to get separated that a funeral procession is not as common as it is back east. Like I'm sure if you've seen in Ontario, you'll have the hearse with the little purple lights and the little flags that everyone stops, just like if an ambulance is going by. I never see that here.
No. Huh. Yeah, I guess it's a high density area, right? It's like you said, it would be easy to get separated.
Yeah, and lots of times, like, the cemetery is in an entirely different city. So if you're coming from here in Coquitlam, the cemetery is located out in Surrey or Right Rock. It's like a 40-minute drive, so there's so many opportunities to get separated from your procession.
Yeah. So we're in a little room here right now. This is where you'd sit down with families and talk about plans and things, right?
Yes.
So I'd imagine there's been a lot of tears shed in this room.
Oh, yes. We have tissue boxes everywhere, as you can see.
Oh, yeah. And on the wall, it's like, explain what I'm seeing on the wall over there.
Yeah, so these are a variety of our cremation urns. Now, this is just a small selection of what we can offer. So it just kind of puts things on display for people to see what their options can be. And so you can notice that there's so many different materials, different sizes, different shapes that can all go towards holding the cremated remains for a family. So I think if you look at those, the circular ones at the very top there, the tube-shaped ones, those ones are specifically for scattering, and they're also biodegradable as well.
So they kind of look like bigger versions of like fancy Scotch bottle containers.
Yeah, exactly. If people want a size comparison, we say like a wine box.
And then they have nice picturesque nature designs on them. Yeah. One's a dove, there's a rainbow, sunflower field, sun setting or rising, depending on your optimism.
Some people like the ocean, some people like the forest flowers. It kind of gives a little bit of a variety for the person too.
What's the protocol on spreading ashes? So like I get my uncle in my wine container, and then I want to go to the ocean and drink some wine with him. Can I just spread them in the ocean, or? Yeah,
in the ocean is fine. What we like to do is let families to use their best discretion when it comes to things like that. So if you are spraying ashes on public property or private property, we do recommend that they get some sort of permission first.
Okay.
Like I hear the golf courses are very popular to spray grandpa's ashes along. So it's always good to have permission from that place that you're scattering, just in case. And if you are doing it at a location that maybe like a public park, like I hear Stanley Park is very popular for spreading ashes as well, it's just being private about it. You don't want to go waving ashes around in like the middle of a trail and it can blow into people's faces or things like that.
Yeah.
Kind of just be discreet about it is the biggest thing. And clean as well.
Have you ever seen that scene in The Big Lebowski where they go to spread Walter?
I haven't seen that movie.
Have you heard about it?
I'm sure I've heard about it, but I've never seen the movie.
Okay, well,
unfortunately,
you can go and watch it to get the full magic, but basically they go to a cliffside to spread their beloved Walter's ashes, and it's the ocean, there's wind, and it just all blows.
Always check the direction of the wind, too.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Yeah, because, I mean, ashes are safe. Even if someone died of a communicable disease and like that, there's no biological element at all to a cremated remain. So if you do get it on you, you're not going to get sick or dirty. It is just ash, is bone material. There's nothing dangerous about it. It's just the ick factor, I guess.
Yeah. So everything, all the chemicals and stuff get burnt out.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's nothing dangerous at that point.
So, what's his face from the Rolling Stones? Keith Richards. He said he snorted some of his father's ashes.
I think I heard that. Yeah.
So he was fine.
Yeah,
and I'm sure if there were chemicals, he wouldn't have died.
Yeah.
Oh, you can get chemical like the ashes in the
I think I've heard a little bit about it, that people get their ashes mixed into like tattoo ink and then they get it tattooed on them.
Yeah.
There are so many options on what you can do with ashes these days.
That's cool.
We can put it, I don't think we have any examples in here, but you can get like blown glass now, and you can have ashes like rolled into that into like an ornament or like a paperweight kind of thing.
Oh, interesting.
We can offer things like that, but jewelry you can have ashes put into. There's so many options on what you can do.
Yeah. It's cool that there are so many options, but I wonder too if I guess it would depend on the situation, but would that be like clinging to death a little bit if you had like earrings with ashes in them?
I don't know. I mean, I always feel like, well, my parents, whenever they pass away, they're both getting buried, so I wouldn't have cremated remains. But if they were, I would think it'd be nice to have a necklace with like a little bit of mom or a little bit of dad in it or something like that. Yeah. Maybe it's just because I'm a funeral director. I don't find it morbid or anything like that. But it's nice to have something from that person that's you can have with you all the time.
Okay. Yeah, I guess. Yeah. I'm probably looking at it more from a morbid standpoint or like a getting hung up
personal
standpoint.
Preference too. People
100%.
are like, no, that's not something I'd want. Other people are like, yes, give me like 7 necklaces with all cremated remains, things like that.
Yeah. I saw, it was probably some BuzzFeed thing. I saw online, it was like different ways to have your remains memorialized. And like one was having your remains in like the lead in a pencil.
Oh, I've heard of that before.
And then like their name was on the pencil and stuff, like the person's name. And then another one was this little, it was like a cup full with like a seed from a tree and like some ashes and stuff in it, and then it like sprouts out of the cup after you plant it.
I've heard of those ones. Yeah,
that's kind of cool.
Yeah,
because like that it seems like a more expedited version of nature's natural course. Like your ashes to ashes, dust to dust, and
exactly. Yeah, kind of like giving new life to an old life, kind of thing.
Yeah. Are there, what would be like the most green funeral possible? Like the most environmentally conscious?
Yeah, I think definitely burial would probably be the most green.
Yeah.
Having no embalming would also be a little more green because, of course, the chemicals that you're putting into the body will eventually seep into the ground. Not in an extreme way, but I mean, it would still be there. So I think if a biodegradable casket and in a basic burial without any kind of vault. I mean, in terms of green burials, it's very specific for the cemetery as well, if there's going to be some sort of grave liner that's included as well. And the reason for that is to kind of stop the sloping of the ground over time, because once everything breaks down, it kind of brings the ground down. Okay. So a lot of cemeteries like to have grave vaults to keep everything level. So I'd say the greenest option that I can think of is just burial, biodegradable casket, no type of embalming, no plastics. I know a lot of Baha'i families like to do green options as well, which is just a wrap kind of dressing before the burial takes place, and no plastic of any kind to be used. So kind of just whatever you can do best for the environment is probably the most greenest option you can come up with.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
I was surprised to hear you say that the burial was the most environmentally conscious. I guess if you're doing a cremation, that's burning off fumes.
Yeah, cremation is not, I wouldn't say it's terrible for the environment, but you are using a lot of resources for that process. You're losing gas and you're burning it off into the environment. There are large smokestacks on the top of every crematorium that you're releasing into the atmosphere as well. Not in an extreme sense, but you are releasing some sort of emission from that process too.
Yeah.
And by going back to the ground, I believe it's just the most natural way you can do it.
Yeah. So, like, how has your view of, I guess, life or death changed, do you think, since you've been here?
Oh, I think it's made a complete 180 turn since I've started getting involved in this profession. I mean, I was always the type that kind of like, death is right around the corner. You never know. It can always happen to you anytime. I've had a few personal death experiences in my life that kind of shaped who I am in a way. And by becoming funeral director, I kind of realized the things that really matter most in life, it's not about the things you acquire. It's more about the people and the relationships that you build and the good that you do. So you kind of learn that life is important and the relationships you build with people are important. Because that's what, when you do pass away, that's the things that people remember and that's the things that people talk about. They're not going to mention all the money that you'd accumulated or things like that, or the terrible things that you may have done at some point. It's all the good things and all the good things you accomplished for yourself and for your family and things like that.
I think that's
and the fear factor is completely gone too.
Yeah.
I would say I'm officially not afraid of death, but I'd be afraid of dying in a painful way.
Yeah.
I think the pain is the fear.
That's what I always say too. Yeah, it's I'm not afraid of dying. Like, I don't know what's after. But the year leading up to that, I don't want it to be horrible. So
absolutely, I think there's a lot of reasons people do fear death, and that's for the fear of the pain, their feeling of dying in an undignified way. If you're sick for a very long time, you can't really take care of yourself. People kind of fear being helpless in that way.
Yeah.
They fear being a burden to their family that they have to be taken care of all the time too. So there's a lot of fears in regards to death, but I don't think death itself is anything to fear. It's one of the most natural things in the world. To die.
As natural as coming into it.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, that's awesome. I think that's a good spot to end right there.
Perfect.
So we're at the Burquitlam Funeral Home. Where can people go for more information if they want to look into pre-planning or they're just curious?
Yeah. They can always give us a phone call at our office. We're here Monday through Saturday all through the week. Do you want our phone number?
Sure.
Sure.
Go for it.
It's 604-936-9987. They can call anytime. They can also visit our website, which is the burquitlamfuneralhome.ca. And there's resources on there, information, and they can always get in contact us through that way as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for your time. And
Thanks for coming by.
Yeah.